Welcome to another lovely Tuesday Live with my friend Susan. Hopefully you guys are all healthy and staying hydrated. Got my water today. I'm being a good girl. I know we are, those of you who are big law nerd junkies like me, we are on Karen Reed Verdict Watch. So hopefully that is at least another hour away and we can just hang out while we are all waiting for that verdict to come down. Today we are going to be talking about flexible thinking with my awesome friend Susan, and we'll run the intro real quick and they'll bring her on. Hi, I'm Nicole, and as you have probably guessed, I have ADHD. I live and breathe all things ADHD in my personal, family, and professional life. I have a background in psychology and special education, and I've gained a lot of knowledge over the years about ADHD, what it really is, how it touches every aspect of your life and the life of your child, as well as a wealth of information and strategies for living with ADHD and parenting kids with ADHD. In this community, we share stories, we learn together, and we support each other as we navigate all things ADHD. Welcome. Alrighty. Welcome, Susan.
Hello, Nicole. My favorite place to be on Tuesdays.
I'm touched. I am trying not to freeze to death down here in my office. I've got a heating pad on my lap and a fuzzy blanket.
So yeah, I have the air conditioning going over here.
Well, it's like 98 degrees outside, but in my office, it is freezing because it's in the basement and AC works real well down here. So I'm trying not to freeze to death. All right. So why don't you go ahead and give just a brief introduction? I know you introduced yourself a little bit last week, but just kind of give people an idea who you are.
Right. I'm Dr. Susan Blumberg. I'm a former child clinical psychologist, and I have been a life coach for teens and young adults for the past, 8 or 9 years. I'm also just completing and ending my 40-year career as a special education advocate, helping families get the right special education services for their kids of all ages. And I'm happy to be here because I specialize in working with families of kids with a wide range of issues. I'm parent to 2 twice exceptional young adults of my own, meaning that they're both highly gifted and have one, or in my case, many disability labels for both my kids, and I specialize in working with that population, especially kids on the spectrum and with nonverbal learning disability, and of course, ADHD. And my specialization is in helping coach kids with executive functioning disorders, which ranges the whole spectrum of disability labels and giftedness.
Yes, thank you. Susan and I met in 2020 in a clubhouse room. I don't even remember where or how, but we somehow connected and thought, we've got some shared life experience and shared backgrounds. We should chat. We started doing a weekly clubhouse room, which shifted eventually to Instagram Live, but we did that for, a year and a half. And then we took a little time off because life got crazy for both of us, but we are so excited to be back.
Absolutely.
To have you guys with us. Susan is a wealth of knowledge, and I love to pick her brain when I'm struggling with stuff with my own kids. So I'm happy to have you here. So talking about executive functioning, right? Now, this is something that it gets talked about a lot with ADHD, but I think it's important to know that there are other neurodevelopmental conditions that all kind of overlap in this area, right? So we've talked about autism, specific learning disabilities, and giftedness, which giftedness is a neurodevelopmental difference, right?
Yes.
I don't know. It's been a little while since we kind of defined that twice exceptionality. So real quick, for those of you who are wondering what that means, twice exceptional means that they are both gifted and have some sort of disabling condition. highly common for people who have one neurodevelopmental difference to have another related. So a lot of gifted kids come with other quirks, but giftedness in and of itself also has some they call, oh my gosh, I just lost the word.
Overexcitabilities.
Yes.
But I also want to stop you and say gifted is not just intelligence. It could
Yes.
be artistic or musical. It could be creativeness. I use the definition from Susan Baum of the Bridge School, which is any area in which you are in the top 1 to 2% on of skill level, and you're gifted in a wide variety of skills. It's not just limited to intellectual ability and any disability label. It's not just learning disabilities. It's
Right.
ADHD, autism, learning disability, blindness, deafness, cerebral palsy, and other motor disabilities. And so people really need to broaden the horizons. It's not just intelligence and learning disabilities. It's a much broader definition.
Yeah, and I've got 3 twice exceptional kids of my own, one of which is, high average on IQ tests, but is musically a genius. He can pick up any instrument and play it. We're fairly certain he has perfect pitch. He's not at the point where he knows all the note names, so he can't be tested for perfect pitch, but he is just an incredible little musician, and he's been working on composing and creating his own music, which I am excited because I told him if he wrote me some good stuff, then I could use it on my channel.
Extraordinary. Yeah.
Hopefully, we'll start getting some good stuff coming from him lately or in the near future that I can share, because he's incredibly talented that way. And then we talk about with kids who are gifted in particular, what we call asynchronous development, where they might be really strong in one thing and have weaknesses or relative weaknesses in other areas, which makes it sometimes a little tricky to identify those kids as gifted. So that's a topic that we'll have to do a full hour on later.
Sounds good.
Today, we are continuing talking about executive functioning, and we're going to talk about flexible thinking. So,
definitions first.
Definitions first, yeah.
So, a lot of people don't understand that flexible thinking is a form of executive functioning at all. But if I ask them about how rigid your child is, or if they have black and white thinking, boom, 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 parents start, just pouring out the stories. And the reason is that kids with many disabilities, including ADHD, are extremely rigid or black and white in their thinking. And obviously, flexible thinking is the flip side of that coin. Flexible thinking is the ability to switch from one plan to an alternate plan if something isn't working out, is the ability to flow with changes in their circumstances, and is the ability to take in new information and create new plans and new actions based on new information coming in without seizing up, so to speak, without becoming rigid, without becoming frozen, whether that's emotionally frozen or physically frozen, without going into what we would call the autonomic responses of fight, flight, or freeze. And so flexible thinking
is the next one. Fight, flight, freeze, or fawn
yes, it is a primary executive function skill that many of our kids lack. And because parents are so focused on the rigidity and the black and white thinking, they don't realize what the flip side of that is. Whereas there are many, many, many strategies, which we'll talk about today, to be able to adjust to that. So let's talk about some examples of rigidity and black and white thinking. Do you want to start off, Nicole?
Sure. Yeah. So, flexible thinking is one that kind of, all of these executive functions, right? They overlap each other a lot.
Yes.
So a lot of flexible thinking comes in to play with planning when plans don't go the way that you think they're going to go. It's something that we most commonly, I think, associate with people with autism is that rigidity and inflexibility, but it is certainly present in other neurodevelopmental conditions.
I'm going to
So what does it?
interrupt. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm going to disagree with you.
Okay.
I think people, ADHD and nonverbal learning disability are equally likely to have rigidity and black and white thinking.
I just don't
and
think people
autism is
recognize
not the most common.
I just don't think people recognize it. They do see it, that rigidity, and understand that that's something that comes with autism. The autism awareness movement has brought a lot of that kind of awareness to people. And so I think people associate it more with those, not that it's not present in the others.
Okay,
but that
I'll accept
these
that
more
wording.
classic kind of rigid thinking and inflexibility is something that we go, oh, I know that that's something that someone with autism does that we might not know that someone with ADHD does. Is that acceptable?
I'll accept that wording.
Okay. So flexible thinking is kind of the ability to go with the flow, thinking maybe there could be another way, spontaneity versus sticking to a schedule or plan, or there's
Okay, I'm
only
going to
one way
interrupt
of doing
again.
things. Okay.
It's not spontaneity. Spontaneity is something else entirely. Flexible thinking is when new information comes in and you're able to shift. Okay, that's actually the executive functioning skill involved. Shift from plan
Sure.
A to plan B. And that's different than spontaneity.
Yes. I would say that if you struggle with flexible thinking, you may struggle with other people who are spontaneous.
That's exactly right. That's the perfect example, because you think things, you're wanting routine, you're wanting things to go A, B, C, D. And if a spontaneous person comes in and says, let's do Pew, then you're having to shift from your idea of what's going to happen to the next idea. So for example, in school, when there are unscheduled assemblies, unscheduled fire drills, that can really disrupt a child who doesn't have the ability to do flexible thinking, because it disrupts their routine of what's going to happen throughout the day. And so we write in a lot of 504 plans and IEPs, if there's a substitute coming in, if there's a fire drill scheduled, that we have to tell this child in advance. If there's going to be any change in their daily schedule, they have to have some kind of warning, because they don't have flexible thinking and they need to have a warning and some transition time. So the way that I would rephrase what you said is they have difficulty with spontaneous people.
Right. So what sometimes this looks like for me as an adult woman with ADHD is, I make a plan for my day. I'm going to do X and then Y and then Z. And if X doesn't happen, I will get very stuck and nothing happens, even though I could very well do Y and Z, but I got stuck on the fact that, well, I need to do X first. This happens a lot to me when I'm like cleaning my house, right? Like I'm going to just go clean this room. But before I clean that room, I have to organize, if I'm looking at my office, before I clean my office and before I can organize my desk, I have to go through this stack of papers. And if I don't go, before I can go through that stack of papers, I have to scan these things. And so I get stuck in that loop of task initiation, of planning, because I'm too stuck on the fact that it has to go in this order and I have to do this before I can do that.
Great example.
Kids that struggle with this, they don't like surprises in their routines. I have one in particular, my son, who he makes plans in his brain of how his day is going to go without consulting anyone else. And then if there's an appointment that comes up or there's something on the schedule, or his little brother wants him to go hang out with him doing something else, he struggles to shift with that. He gets really upset if there's surprises to the schedule. I have to make sure that he knows ahead of time when appointments are coming up, if there's something different to our routines during the week, so that he can plan around them. Because if we just throw it at him, it doesn't work. It has caused some issues in relationships between him and my other son, who is much more of a spontaneous kind of kid. He, whatever pops into his head right then, he wants to go and do. He's got more of the impulse control when it comes to
Again,
the things
that's
he
not
wants to do with his day.
spontaneous. That's impulse control. Two different things.
It's kind of whatever he feels like he wants to do at the moment. Oh, let's go
Right.
do this thing. And he really wants to spend time with his brother, but his brother will automatically shut him down and be like, no, because I've got this other plan, right? So we've had to work with them quite a bit on, he thinks this way and you think this way, and you guys are going to have to come to the middle and be flexible with each other, knowing that, well, what if I then don't want to do that thing in a half an hour when he wants to do it? Well, you might have to, be flexible in that moment. So those are times when it kind of comes up relationship wise, is if you have a mix match of people who are
Excellent.
more impulsive versus more flexible.
Excellent point. Another thing that comes up is what we call context change. So say things always go the same way on Saturdays at home, or the teacher always has the same order or routine. And say then a principal walks into the classroom, or you suddenly have an unexpected visitor. And so what happens then is, if things are running smoothly and you have your routine, and then you throw a new variable into the equation, and you have to make a sudden change in your plans. That's what I said about, there's an assembly called, or a fire drill, or suddenly someone shows up at your door and asks to play, if for a younger child, for example. Or a teen forgets they have homework and on Sunday afternoon suddenly remembers they have a project to do, right? We call this context change because their brain is sort of running along a certain well-run path. And you can think about it like switching a train onto a new track. And what happens is their brain seizes up, literally. It's sort of like concrete, instance freeze concrete, right? And they're not able to make that shift. The word I used a little while ago. This is all about shifting. It's the name of the executive function here that's involved. Being able to shift from one direction that might be flowing well and the routine is going, and then all of a sudden the context shifts and they're supposed to be going down a new train track. And what happens is literally their brain freezes up and they're not able to think through, what do I have to do to be successful in this new direction or with these new contexts that they have to process.
Yeah, and a lot of with that can come a lot of anxiety then pops up, then frontal lobes shut down even more, and we can't problem solve, right? I know sometimes a lot with younger kids, or I guess with adults too, sometimes you find they'll just start blaming, others for causing that distress, right? You changed my thing, it's your fault, rather than being able to problem solve.
And you hear parents say, just deal with it, which is about the most unhelpful thing you can say to a person like this.
It's like,
spouse
just
to spouse,
see better,
or adult to kid. Saying just deal with it is the opposite of what this child needs. And we'll talk about better interventions in a minute. But I want you to get this idea, our listeners to get the idea of how difficult it is for this shift to happen. Because the way people's brains work who have issues with rigidity and black and white thinking is they can manage when things are going in the routine they expect, when the day has been planned out for them, but that context change. So my daughter, in addition to autism and ADHD, has Tourette's syndrome. And so, for example, if the phone rings and I say to her, "Hi, Aviva, I need you to do this," while she was doing something else, her brain literally seizes up and she goes into a Tourette's episode. Where she's unable to speak or move and she starts ticking. not because she isn't able to do the activity I asked her, but
Right.
her brain was going this way. The phone rang, and now I'm asking her to shift this way. And
Yeah.
it literally closes down her brain. And it can last 5 minutes and it can last 20 minutes. And
Right.
then when she comes out of it, she may be able to do what I asked her and she may not. Depends how severe the episode is. But it literally shuts down the neurons in her brain.
Mm-hmm.
That's a very extreme example, but it is what happens to many of our kids and adults with ADHD, some learning disabilities, and anyone
Right.
who has what we call black and white thinking. I want to say a word more about black and white thinking.
Okay.
Because people say it, but I want to be very clear how it relates to what we're talking about. These are our rule followers. You
Yes.
know, the world is actually all in shades of gray, which means there's no right way or wrong way to do almost anything.
Right.
We shouldn't murder people. We shouldn't steal from people.
That's a pretty
There's
clear.
a few really black and white things, right? But most other things, there's really tones of gray. Most things we do and the way we interact with people, there's really no exact black and white way to do it. But the people we're talking about here who have this lack in their executive functioning, they don't see the shades of gray. It's very black and white. You never can break a rule. You never can, whether you're an adult or a child. So a child.
And a lot of times they will have rules, right, in their head that aren't necessarily rules. This is definitely something we see with my youngest on the spectrum, right? Is he's got his rules and he is living by them and he is enforcing them, but no one else knows what the rules are.
There you go.
And sometimes we have to kind of we have to kind of directly teach the if-thens. Like, okay, this might be that, because they'll take a rule that fits in one particular situation, right?
Yes.
And then that is now the rule for everywhere. So trying to learn that, well, that might be the rule in this case, but in this case it's not, and that's extremely difficult for him.
So a good example, my autistic daughter, when very young, we had to teach her about white lies. Right?
Yeah,
which is the term that's used about lies that kind of socially grease the wheels.
Socially acceptable.
So you don't walk around and tell people their hair is ugly, their clothes are ugly, they're fat, they're stupid. All those things may be true, but we don't say them in social situations because it's awkward and can cause social upset. And so we had to say to my daughter, as I teach many of my younger clients when I worked with younger clients, that even though those things may be true, there are reasons we don't say them, even though we otherwise tell you to be completely honest. We don't say them because they can upset the social balance of a situation. So here we are,
and the times and places in which where you can and can't say things, and that my one son had a little bit of a hard time with, well, if I'm not sharing the whole truth, then if I'm withholding truth, then that is the same thing as lying. So that's sometimes an interesting conversation to have.
Lies of omission versus lies of commission. A lie of commission is saying you're pretty when you're not. A lie of omission is not saying anything at all. And explaining these to people who are very black and white thinkers is important in what we call the hidden social rules, which is things that neurotypical people learn by what we call osmosis. They just sort of absorb them from watching social interaction. But very black and white thinkers and rigid thinkers don't absorb them, and it impacts their social relationships.
Yes. And I think maybe here is a good time to kind of talk about the differences between, like, social skill issues and things like that with people with ADHD versus people with autism, right? And oftentimes it is where it comes from, right? A lot of people with ADHD will have trouble in those kinds of social situations because of impulse control, because they're not really paying attention to everything that's happening around them. They're distracted. They're in the conversation. They're hearing this conversation over here. And so they'll make social faux pas. Whereas, someone with autism, it's more of a fundamental not understanding of those social rules in general. That's a very, very, very broad stroke, but.
Right. Plus what I just said, which is the person with ADHD, if they stop to think about it, they may have a better understanding of these hidden social rules. They may not apply them, but if you ask them, they can explain them.
Yes.
Whereas the person with autism may not be able to explain them at all.
Mm-hmm.
Should we talk about strategies, or do you have
Yeah,
more
let's
to say
do that.
about
Let me just check
definitions?
my notes.
I
There
don't
was
see any
one thing I
comments.
wanted to talk about,
Mhm.
just briefly, is that some of these troubles with planning and problem solving that come with that inflexible thinking can be related to weaknesses in working memory, which is also a common thing
Mhm.
that happens with ADHD because they're not able to hold all of the information and scenarios in their mind in order to process and see the potential
Yes.
solutions. So just,
And again, that's
quick
not
note I made.
specific to ADHD.
No.
That goes with all of these disabilities we're
Yes.
discussing, including some forms of learning disability. It's lack of pre-planning, and we're going to talk about that in strategies in just a minute.
Yeah. So let's talk about strategies, how to develop these skills. This flexible thinking is fortunately one of the executive functions that actually you can have quite a bit of impact on
Mhm.
with the right therapy. Some of them are just, I am never going to understand time. I can
we'll get to that.
I can put strategies in
I'm gonna
place
help
and I
with
can
that.
do things, but the brain just does not process time correctly.
That's why we have coping strategies.
Yes, so there's
I'm big on
coping
that.
strategies versus therapies that can
That's
actually
right.
impact your ability to
With
do so.
executive functioning skills in general, there is no therapy to cure any of these.
Right.
But
Their
there's
brain
always
differences in
coping
development.
strategies. We talked about that last week. It has everything
Yes.
to do with the wiring in your brain. Can't
Right.
fix that. What I can do is teach a lot of good coping strategies.
Yes.
And that's what is important here with flexible thinking as well. I want to tell you 2 vignettes that will help explain this.
Great.
So I'm always shocked when I go to a restaurant or an event and there's a kid, and it could be from young through young adult, who is there with nothing to do. Not even, maybe older one might have their phone with them, but not a toy, not a book, not in anything. You see this in church, you see this in synagogue, you see this at restaurants, you see this at concerts, and the kid is a mess, and they're fussy, and they're poking at mom, and they want to get up. And I see this on airplanes. I'm in New York right now instead of Denver because I'm visiting a friend. Saw this on the airplane. I never traveled without a bag full of fidgets, toys.
No, I over prepare.
Drinks,
I have like way
snacks.
more, and then my kids always just end up on their devices. But
I
you better
called
believe
it
I have
my
an
luggage.
entire backpack full of
And
alternate
in fact,
activities.
when they were younger, I used to buy like dollar store stuff and wrap it in wrapping paper. So it made it more exciting.
Even better,
present.
Wrap it all up in masking tape and then wrap it in wrapping paper.
Oh, so they have to
Takes
really
them longer
unwrap.
to open it.
So the key thing here that I'm trying to say is you have to, and we said this last week actually under impulse control, you must plan for success. And that means thinking ahead if it's a child, or thinking ahead for yourself once you understand your own ADHD and other executive functioning issues. You must plan for success, and that means planning for your environment. If you know that you're in a situation where things could happen, which means anywhere, I'm getting excited here, you must have not just plan A and plan B, but you might need plan C and D as well. which means if it's going to be a while till there's food, bring granola bars. If there's going to be a while that you might not have a drink, bring a bottle of water. Bring two kinds of fidgets, not just one, because you might get bored with the first one.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure you have not just your device, which might run out of batteries, but have a hardcover or a paperback book, because my device ran out of battery on the plane and I didn't get to
bring a spare battery.
So, right, so the key thing is planning ahead. You must be prepared for plan A, B, and probably C. And if you're the parent, it's your job to plan ahead for the kid, which means having the snacks, the drink, at least two kinds of fidgets, right? Not expecting your child to be able to plan for themselves. Yes. And if you're the adult and you know that these are your issues, so we have in our home for many years now, since she was in middle school, a typed list by our front door with everything on it that she has to check before she leaves our house. Mm-hmm. So when she was in school, it would say things like, did you check your backpack for your homework? Do you have your meds? Did you check the weather? Do you need a coat? Do you need an umbrella? Right? When she went to college, do you have your laptop? Do you have your wires for your laptop? Because she'll have to plug it in. When she went to culinary school, are you wearing your chef's shoes? Do you have your apron? Because she'd forget her apron. So we updated that list by the front door as she needed it, as she grew older and her supports that she needed changed. And yes, at first I had to stand there and read it with her, but now she doesn't leave the house without checking that list. And we've updated, but it has to have, did you check the weather? Do you have your meds? Do you have what you need for the day? Did you bring your wallet? Do you have your train pass? Because she's not able to plan ahead for herself.
Yeah, and a lot of these are planning and issues and organization issues, but also, swinging back to the flexible thinking things is right. Plan ahead for those kinds of bumps in the road. Sit and practice ahead of time. Okay, we are planning that it's going to go this way. What happens if this happens? And script through a few different options while you're calm and the frontal lobes are all on board about, okay, what if there's traffic on this road? What will we do? What if, we run out of XYZ? What can we do? What if we forget our toothbrush on the trip? What can we do? Right. And while I think it's a good time to kind of talk about scaffolding support, right? So we're talking about, yes, it's our responsible as parents to be prepared at that point, but including your kids in that process, right? So that you get them thinking about it. Sometimes it can be easier to just do it for them. But we've got to give our kids opportunities to stretch those muscles and build up their flexible thinking skills on things that are small. It's like, if I'm trying to teach my kids how to, this is something we're doing right now. I don't have my cleaning help right now. I'm okay. It is my accommodation, but we decided that we need to take a break from it for a little while for a few reasons. But number one, because our kids need to start learning how to do some of these household things. It's a heck of a lot easier for me to hire someone to do it or for me to clean the bathroom myself. But I know that my child, who's almost 16, is going to need to know how to clean the bathroom, how to clean the kitchen, how to cook a few meals, right? It would be a lot easier for me to just do it for them because they aren't going to do it right. They're not going to do it my way. I'm going to have to go back and be like, oh, you missed this step here, and walk them through that. It is more work for me sometimes to have them do it than to just do it myself, but they need those skills. And similarly, when we're talking about planning for these opportunities to stretch our flexible thinking, we have to work with our kids and start building those muscles up for them.
And I would call that the first thing you said, which is scripting them, I would call role playing.
Sure.
And so What I literally would do, and I've done this with both my kids and my clients, is let's do it. Let's have a pretend interview. Let's have a role play of a situation where I play them and, and they play the adult or whatever. And then we switch. And I would literally recommend the parents practice this with their kids. So whether it's, I need to ask the teacher for help with an assignment and I don't know what to say. So we practice. We don't just tell them what to do. We don't just tell them the questions to ask. We actively role play, because the more they say the words out loud before they have to go and do it with the teacher, the less likely they are to freeze up at the time.
Yes.
It's actually
even this year for one of my sons, like going and asking for help when he definitely is a kid who freezes. I've got one who fights and I've got one who freezes. This is the one who freezes. We took his little folder that he puts his planner and all of his stuff in that he takes around with school, and typed up a kind of if then. Okay, if I'm feeling anxious, here are my options. I can put my card up and go take a break in the wellness center. I can ask, if I don't know what I'm supposed to do, here's 3 ways I can find out what I'm supposed to do. I can look at the board, I can look at the Canvas assignment, I can ask a teacher, I can ask a neighbor. So that when he's sitting in that moment, he's like, oh crap, I wasn't paying attention for the last 10 minutes and I don't know what I'm supposed to do. Instead of just sitting there and looking busy, which he's exceptional at, he has those strategies written out for him on what to do next.
But, I think running them down with him, and you show him. So the teacher says something and you're him and you say, crap, I didn't hear what the teacher said. And you look at the list and say, oh, I'm doing this. And you let him see what it looks like.
We practice it at home,
not just on paper, but saying it out loud. I cannot say enough about how important that is. Yes. So that was the first thing you said about the scripting. The second thing you said was more like being a role model. And this is the thing I really want to say to parents. This works so well with most kids, and parents don't realize it. One of the things we have to do, whether we have ADHD or not, and maybe especially if we have ADHD, because we can show our kids how we are coping with the same situations they're coping with. And this is to talk ourselves out loud through situations that are going to resonate with your kids.
Yes.
So what's very important about this, again, because a lot of our kids are verbal learners or kinesthetic learners, they're not all, that they can just listen to a lecture from a teacher and learn it. They need multimodal learning, meaning they have to see it in writing, they have to hear it, and then they have to do something with their hands. So if you've made a mistake, or you're stuck doing a task that might also be hard for your kid, talk yourself out loud through the problem-solving process that you go through, because you're modeling for your kid how to get yourself unstuck. Because you said before, that's what happens. If you're in your routine and something unexpected occurs, we want to show our kids a process for how we ourselves get out of it. And so if we say, oh my God, I just got this phone call and I thought I was going to have time to run this errand before I had to go over here, and now I'm not going to have time, right? So I'm going to have to arrange for this to happen so that I can take care of getting you to soccer practice on time, and I'm going to call Dad and make this arrangement. And by saying that out loud and letting your kid step through it with you, what you're showing your child is that you're doing flexible thinking, that you're not freezing up, and that kind of role modeling is critical. And the next time it happens, you do it again, and the next time, the refrigerator goes out, My stove breaks when I'm in the middle of cooking for a party. It happened a couple of years ago. I was hysterical. I had 9 people coming for dinner. My stove goes out. I have to call my husband at work, say, you have to get off work and come home now because I have all this food to prep. You know, I'm talking through it out loud.
Yeah.
I really just wanted to break down and cry. But by talking through these out loud, then the next time my kid has an issue, I can say to them, talk me through it out loud, excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
And they have a model for doing that.
Yeah.
I cannot emphasize the importance of it.
Yeah. Some formal therapies, there's cognitive behavioral therapy is great for working on flexible thinking. Exposure type therapy, right? Where
you want to explain what it is?
Yeah. So I'll give an example of my oldest son has OCD. Well, several of my children have OCD. My oldest son has OCD. He went through an intensive outpatient program a few years ago. One of his big things was insects outside, bees in particular. It was becoming a problem because he was like not wanting to go do things that he enjoyed doing. He'd be out in right field at a baseball game and so concerned about, the lights went on. Now there's all these bugs that he's missing. He's not paying attention to the game, or he's not wanting to come out with us on the boat at Lake Powell because there might be a wasp somewhere, right? So for him, part of his exposures that he worked on in therapy, they taught him skills on how to ride through the discomfort. And then they took him out back and had him stand next to the lilac bushes that were full of bees and work through that feeling of discomfort, right? So that's a pretty
extreme
example, right? But when we're talking about these kids who are rigid thinkers, who a change suddenly happens, they're oftentimes filled with that same kind of anxiety, right? They freeze, they fight, those frontal lobes shut down, and they don't know how to process it, right? And riding through those emotions is really important. So working on practicing with small changes in the schedule, it doesn't work if they don't have skills beforehand. So teaching them some techniques on how to ride through that anxiety, breathing techniques, sensory things, mindfulness practice, like we talked about last week, to help so that when they're in that moment, they can ride through it, get to the other side, and realize that it's we can move forward. So practicing then with controlled environments, right? He didn't start out with going and standing next to the bees. He started out with watching a YouTube video of bees, right? And then little toy things that had a little pokey thing, and they would just gently poke his shoulder when he was watching it so that it could get through the fact that, I might be getting stung, progressively working through before now he's able to be outside. And if there's bugs, it's no big deal because he's ridden all the way through that and gotten to the other side. If the anxiety is severe and it's shutting you down, working with a professional on, working through that with some cognitive behavioral strategies is a great way to go.
I wanted to come back to something we started saying, and I realized I didn't get to finish my thought, and it just popped out of my head again. Oh dear.
It'll come back.
Yeah, it'll come back. I had started a thought and we got sidetracked on something interesting, and it'll come back again. I wanted to say also, it was related to this. I can't believe I forgot.
Okay, it'll come back. I would also say, when we're practicing with those things and when we have
rule following. Okay. Remind me, it's about rule following.
You go, because I've got this written down.
We were talking about the rule followers.
Yes.
And this just came up on one of the Parents of Twice Exceptional Kids Facebook group that I admin.
Great group, by the way, if you have kids with twice exceptional kids. It's a wealth of information over there.
Please join us. But it just came up this week, and so it made me think of it. One of the issues with our kids who are very into black and white rule following behavior. My son, who has ADHD and anxiety disorder, was very into this. And it was, this is true. I know it's true. You can't persuade me it's not true. And the problem is, it probably isn't true. We have no idea where they got this information from. And they're very resistant to checking their facts. So this is very common in this kind of black and white thinking. So one of the ways to address this, that's really an important strategy, and I didn't want to forget to share this, Nicole, is to tell them they're allowed to say anything they want as long as they say, in my opinion.
Okay.
They can be as bombastic and opinionated as they like, but they must say, in my opinion. And then we can look it up together. Google is wonderful, but we have to check their facts. So they can't just say the sky is green or purple or aliens, live on Mars. They can say, in my opinion, and I won't shut him down. I won't disagree, as long as he said, in my opinion. And I would listen respectfully and discuss it. And then we had to check the facts together. Right?
Okay. So I'm going to throw a question at you for that.
Yeah. Well, let me just finish the thought.
Okay.
The reason for doing this is that I did not want to disrespect, one, he's highly gifted. He may have read this somewhere or watched it on YouTube, not always the best sources, but I didn't want to disrespect his ability to speak up to me about whatever he wanted, which I allowed him to do as long as he prefaced it with, in my opinion. He could disagree with me at any time by saying, in my opinion. I would respect that.
Okay.
But we had to find the truth together.
So on the flip side of that, with opinions, how do we address when it is an opinion, not a fact issue, but in their brain, it is the only correct opinion, and no one else's opinion could possibly be correct. And if you think differently than me, then you're just stupid.
So that is the really good, that's why this came up, because this is the issue that the person on the parent group brought up. So what happens is the kid would say something, the parent would look up the truth on their own, and then the kid wouldn't accept it. So the key step here, excuse me, finger marks on my glasses, always disconcerting, is you must look up the truth together. And then the kid can continue to say, in my opinion, but the parent is entitled to say, but we looked up the truth and this is the truth. Now, the kid can continue to have their own opinion. That's fine. But there has to be, what's the word I want? The parent has to be able to say, you're allowed to have your opinion, but it's not the truth. Now, is that going to trigger a tantrum or a meltdown? It might. And then you deal with that behavior separately. It's not about the truth. It's not about the opinion. But if they have a tantrum or a meltdown, there's another process for dealing with that. It's separate from arguing over the content of the truth or the opinion. They're two separate behaviors.
So when we're trying to teach this socially, right, that, okay, you have that opinion and someone else might have a different opinion, and that doesn't make them stupid or wrong or less than you, right?
That's correct.
That other person gets to have their opinion. So that is where I'm thinking of a particular.
So the behavior goes back to, sorry, I interrupted. Go ahead.
You're okay. I just, when we're talking about, okay, we've looked up, this is the facts, this is the truth. But what if it is just opinion versus opinion? Right. But the way that they are treating people because of their opinion is.
So then you go to your room because you're not able to behave in a socially appropriate way. Has nothing to do with.
They're not always with me. So we're talking about it after a social interaction, other places. So I guess I was having a hard time teaching how to listen. I mean, and this is the flexible thinking, right? How to get new information and be willing to adjust your opinion, or just allow the other person to have a wrong opinion.
That's it. So I don't make my kid adjust their opinion if they're not able to do that. Hopefully, by, again, this process of that's your opinion, let's look up the truth together. But there's a second issue, which is people are allowed to have different opinions. Mm-hmm. That's the black and white thinking piece. But this is where Ross Green's collaborative, proactive solutions come in. So then we would have a separate conversation outside of the social interaction. I noticed you had a really time when Nicole said such and so. What was that about? And so then we have a different kind of conversation, which is not about your opinion is right or wrong, or their opinion is right or wrong. That's irrelevant. The conversation is about why you couldn't tolerate somebody having a different opinion. Mm-hmm. See, it can't always be about the truth. It's about why was it difficult for them to tolerate? And that's an entirely different conversation.
Yes. It's tricky. It's tricky to try and teach and help your kids to be more flexible thinkers.
Yes. When you're having difficulty, because it's so much, we want them to know the truth. Well, I don't really care. I just want them to be socially appropriate.
Yes.
And then dealing with the truth.
That is the key.
Right. Dealing with the truth. I mean, my son would be hysterical because I'd be right 9 times out of 10. His opinion would be wrong. And he would be furious with me. And he'd go and stomp up the stairs. I think I've told you the story, Nicole. His bedroom is right over our family room. And he'd stomp in his room and the lights would shake in my dining room where I have track lighting. And my husband and I would just laugh because he's stomping around because I was right and he was wrong. Mm-hmm. But he eventually got over that because I was very consistent. As long as he said, in my opinion, I would listen. And that's what he wanted. He wanted the respect.
Sure.
He didn't want me to challenge him, so I never did. Once we got over this, he could say, as long as he said, in my opinion, I would listen, I would discuss it, and then we would say, let's look it up together. And that's what taught him to look it up before he came to talk to me. And I role modeled for him respect for his opinion, and then we would look it up.
So you talked a lot about kind of how to help if you're parenting a kid like this, but let's talk a little bit about if
adults.
You are the one who is having the hard time, right? So we talked about kind of preparing for those bumps in the road and practicing flexible thinking ahead of time, right? Before your anxiety is on board. Self-awareness comes into a piece. Like, we are adults here, right? And yes, struggling with metacognition is part of executive dysfunction.
Yes.
But we can practice, pausing, like we said last week, taking a pause and stepping back and reviewing kind of, am I being inflexible? Am I being too rigid in this moment? And then I would say it's equally important after the fact, when things have gone well, to review that. Journaling is great, or even just sitting down and being like, hey, I handled that situation pretty well. This thing came in, there was a bump in the road and I navigated it, to help remind ourselves that, sometimes it's okay to roll without change, right? The things worked out. That's that, cognitive behavioral piece of letting your system know that it's okay to ride through that discomfort and that we are capable.
I think positive intentions is also super important here. This is the positive growth mindset piece. before you go into a meeting, an interview, a presentation, you stop for 10 seconds and you say to yourself, this is my intention. This is what I want to get out of this. And then if the meeting doesn't go the way you want, you remind yourself, okay, it went off the rails. Somebody hit me with a hardball question I wasn't prepared to answer. Role play yourself in advance. If someone hits me with a hardball question, I don't know how to answer. What's my plan to deal with it?
Yes.
So my plan is to say, and this is how I always handled them, is I don't know the answer, but I know where to look it up and I'll get back to you.
Mm-hmm.
This is the same answer.
Being okay with taking a break and giving yourself time to think. Sometimes my ADHD brain is going so fast that I want to be ahead of the other person rather than sitting back. We said
last week, if you could do that, you wouldn't be neurodivergent, you'd be neurotypical.
Right, but I can practice it and I can give myself a script. I can give myself, if this comes up and I am noticing that I'm doing this, then I'm going to say, that's an interesting question. Give me a second to think about it rather than saying the first thing that comes to mind, right?
Right. Or to say, I'm going to say it again, I don't know the answer to that. I will look it up and get back to you by tomorrow. Mm-hmm. That's a perfectly acceptable answer. And we all have to believe that it's okay to say, I don't know, but I know where to get the answer.
It's hard for those of us with rejection sensitivities to do that because we want to please all the people all the time and have all the answers.
That's they're not necessarily rejection sensitivity. That's actually the opposite. That's actually the opposite of rejection sensitivity. Rejection sensitivity is when someone says no to you, not when you say no to somebody else. That's people.
Well, yes, but if I don't know the answer, then they're going to say no to me.
Yeah, but it's the opposite.
I have to know the answer.
Yeah, it's the opposite of our state. The point here is role playing yourself before you go into that hard meeting, that hard presentation, that interview, and pre-planning. Just the same we said with your kids. Have in your head an answer for that hardball question. Have in your head, what if the fire alarm goes off in the middle of your presentation? Have in your head, you traveled and oh my God, you forgot the thumb drive with your presentation on it. What are you?
I'm very good at doing that after the interaction and replaying and rehearsing what I wish I would have said. So we just have to do that beforehand.
That's right.
Do the rehearsals. We talk to yourself out loud in the car and run through it. If they say this, what would my answer be? If this happens, what am I going to do? If this bump in the road happens, what solutions can I come up with and how do I problem solve through it?
That's what planning for success is all about. Make sure you have a granola bar so you're not hypoglycemic. Make sure you have a water bottle.
Hydrated and fed.
I'm here in New York and I'm telling people I come from Colorado and they're telling me horror stories that people got off the plane and collapsed from altitude sickness. And I'm like, you didn't pre-plan.
Drink more water, people. Come on.
Right? So, it's the key to flexible thinking is pre-planning. It's role playing. It's positive intentions. It's planning for success. It's having backup plans.
And that's it is something you can get better at with practice.
It is.
Again, there are some executive functions that we can cope and we can put strategies in place and we can accommodate, but not all of them are we able to really make a lot of change in our ability. Flexible thinking is one that the more you practice it, the more you do it, you actually can get better at it.
Well, and I'm going to keep disagreeing with you. I think we can do this for all of them, but that's why we're going to have these sessions about all the different forms of executive functioning, because this is what I do as a coach for all the teens and young adults I work with. Is I teach about the 8 essential executive functioning skills and all of these strategies. because I do believe there's accommodations and coping strategies. And
Yes.
with practice, you can make them fundamental habits that'll help support your life.
Yes. Go ahead and let the people know where they can find you.
Yes, I'm going to put it in the comments. I'm at drsusanblumberg.com, and my Facebook page is Dr. Susan Coaching. And you're welcome to find me there with any questions that you have. And you can make an appointment with me for a free consult at drsusanblumberg.com as well.
Well, thank you again for another lively discussion.
It's always good to talk with you, Nicole.
We have a lot of fun.
Always.
So we will see you all next week. Same bat time, same bat channel. We'll be talking about another one of our executive function skills. If you have questions in the meantime, you can leave comments on this video. You can reach out to me or Susan at Facebook or on her website. You can reach out to me. My website is parenting-adhd.com. But also on Instagram, Nicole Miles Coaching, which I will probably be changing to Nicole Has ADHD here shortly, just to keep everything simple. But you can find me there on Instagram. I do respond to direct messages there or over email. And if you have questions, we would love to hear them. So please subscribe to the channel. You can find the community section there. I usually have some posts up for questions for Q&As as we get through. In a few weeks, we'll probably pause and do a Q&A session. So put your questions, your comments, and make sure you have liked the video. It helps us in the algorithm, and subscribe to the channel, and we will see you next week. If I can find my outro button. Thank you for watching. If you haven't already, please like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. This video is not a substitute for counseling, psychotherapy, medical, or mental health care. The information and advice shared here should not be used in place of any form of diagnosis, treatment, or therapy. Information provided here does not involve diagnosis or treatment of medical or mental or psychological disorders. If you feel the need for professional support, please seek a local professional in your area. This video is for educational and entertainment purposes only.